My name is Mark, a 38-year-old man, and I've been married to Lisa, 41, for 15 years. We have two incredible kids in elementary school. When we first got together, our relationship seemed effortless, with no major challenges in sight. But after we got married, cracks started to show. Over the years, Lisa's behavior and expectations grew increasingly erratic, and no matter how much effort I put into solving problems, new ones kept appearing. It became clear that stability wasn't something we could achieve together. By December, I had made the decision to leave. It was no longer worth bending over backward for someone who constantly shifted the goalposts. Lisa had confided to me that she believed herself frigid and uninterested in intimacy. By then, I had stopped initiating anything physical with her. It was clear she had no desire to fix that part of our marriage. She claimed her issues were personal and unrelated to me, but I wasn't so sure. We tried therapy to address the distance between us, even consulting specialists when general counseling failed. Although we uncovered some of her past trauma, it didn't change the fact that she had emotionally checked out of the marriage years ago. For the past 7 years, there's been no physical connection between us. I took it upon myself to focus on what really mattered, my children and building a stable life. At the start of the new year, Lisa's behavior became even more erratic. She began reconnecting with friends in other states, most of whom were in the middle of messy divorces. After one of these visits, she bluntly announced that she wanted a divorce. Her declaration didn't surprise me. It only confirmed what I had suspected for a long time. Lisa had been taking extended breaks from work, disappearing for hours while I handled our household and kids. When she was home, she spent most of her time locked in our bedroom. Her attitude toward me and the children grew colder, to the point where I decided to shield them from her negativity by taking them to my parents' house when tensions ran high. I confided only in my brother James and his wife, Emma, during this time. With our mother Diane battling cancer, I didn't want to add to my parents' worries. But during one particularly frustrating weekend, when Lisa chose to spend her free time with her friends instead of addressing our family issues, I turned to James for advice. During our conversation, James dropped a bombshell that I wasn't prepared for. He said Emma had overheard something shocking a few years ago during a family holiday. Lisa had apparently told her, "If we ever get divorced, I'll take everything he has." Hearing this, I felt a surge of anger rather than panic. I knew then that I couldn't let Lisa manipulate or destroy everything I'd built. I pressed James for details, and Emma confirmed that Lisa had been dead serious. She had even brought this up with my parents years ago, but they hadn't told me until now. I immediately called my parents to get to the bottom of it. During our discussion, Diane revealed another piece of the puzzle. Lisa had once confided in her that she envied my cousin Sophie, who had divorced and built an independent life. Diane hadn't told me at the time, thinking it wasn't relevant. But now, it all fit together. Lisa had been planning her escape for years while I had been working to hold everything together. From that point on, I took control of the situation. I started digging deeper into our finances, ensuring I had a full understanding of our tax obligations, assets, and liabilities. Lisa's behavior only became more erratic, as though she sensed I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. She avoided home as much as possible and seemed repelled by the idea of being part of our family. Eventually, she found an excuse to move out, leaving me with the responsibility of holding everything together. Lisa moved out and found a place with a friend's elderly mother who charged minimal rent in exchange for help around the house. This arrangement seemed to suit Lisa well, since the woman craved companionship and needed assistance with chores, things Lisa was apparently willing to provide when it suited her. A few weeks ago, after one of her nights out with friends, Lisa and I sat down with the children to explain the situation. The conversation wasn't easy. One of our kids clung to Lisa for comfort, visibly upset, while another tried to process everything calmly. The third, however, reacted strongly upon hearing that Lisa planned to take the family dog with her. It was clear her decision to leave was having a profound effect on the children, even if she didn't seem too concerned about the fallout. Lisa then decided to move out earlier than scheduled, citing my early morning hospital shifts as an inconvenience for her late-night returns at 2 a.m. The day of her departure finally came. My parents arrived to take the kids, sparing them the awkwardness of watching their mother leave. True to form, Lisa left without even saying goodbye to the children, let alone offering them a hug. Within a week of her departure, I wasted no time consulting a lawyer to set the legal process in motion. Surprisingly, Lisa didn't resist. She cooperated with the lawyer and signed all the necessary documents promptly. However, in the weeks that followed, her lack of involvement in the children's lives became glaringly obvious. She made no real effort to reach out or check in. The kids mentioned that whenever they were with her, she was either exercising or glued to her phone, showing little interest in their lives beyond superficial pleasantries. Her priorities were clear. Maintaining her appearance mattered more than her role as a mother. After she moved out, I focused on creating a stable environment for the kids. During the rare occasions she visited, she would often be short on money. Despite everything, I chose to provide her with groceries and a couple of times financial help. While some might see this as a mistake, I considered it a way to keep things civil, if only for the children's sake. However, I made sure to keep a close eye on our finances, knowing Lisa's history of self-serving behavior. The situation reached a boiling point last week. Lisa took the kids away for a few days, conveniently aligning it with one of my long hospital shifts. When I returned home, I decided to use the quiet time productively, diving into my hobbies and reconnecting with things I enjoyed, like working on music. I set up my computer and started organizing my workspace, but annoying notifications from Lisa's iCloud account kept interrupting me. Frustrated, I attempted to fix the issue by sifting through files on the computer. That's when I stumbled across something I hadn't expected. If you're guessing what I found, you're probably right. Despite her attempts to erase traces of her actions, she had left behind photos and videos, some explicit, documenting her infidelity with a mutual friend. Seeing those files left no doubt about what had been happening behind my back. Rather than letting emotions take over, I processed the situation calmly. This discovery confirmed what I had long suspected. Lisa had been living a double life, and our marriage had been a facade for years. The image she had carefully crafted was nothing but a lie. The next day, Lisa returned with the children. For their sake, I chose not to confront her immediately about what I had uncovered. Maintaining a sense of normalcy for the kids was more important than exposing her betrayal in front of them. I knew I would address it on my terms when the time was right. This experience reinforced something I'd always known deep down. Trust your instincts. Lisa had spent years gaslighting me, dismissing my concerns as paranoia or unfounded mistrust. But now, the truth was undeniable. Here's the next part of the rewritten story, integrating the new details and maintaining a strong, decisive tone for Mark. After uncovering Lisa's infidelity, I began piecing together more of her deceitful behavior. It turned out she wasn't just cheating with a mutual friend. She had also maintained a suspicious relationship with her ex-boyfriend. During one of our therapy sessions, I stumbled upon a message she had sent him. In it, she vividly described a dream about being intimate with him and advised him to keep it a secret, claiming I'd react too strongly if I ever found out. When I confronted Lisa about the message, she dismissed my concerns as overreactions and even had the audacity to claim that our therapist would agree with her. It later came to light that this therapist was someone Lisa had seen during her teens and early 20s, a clear conflict of interest I should have spotted earlier. Looking back, I question why I ever trusted her choice of therapist. One thing I've learned through all of this is the value of documentation and preparation. Since January, I've kept a meticulous log of Lisa's actions and interactions with the children, down to the hour. These records, along with time-stamped evidence of her infidelity, will be invaluable to my lawyer. While I can no longer document her behavior now that she's moved into her own place, I've considered recording our personal conversations. My lawyer fully supports this idea, especially given her erratic and self-centered tendencies. At this point, Lisa appears more invested in her own life than in her responsibilities as a mother. She's clearly eager to finalize the divorce, likely because she knows she's entitled to half of my 401k. As for our property, things were divided amicably before she moved out. We didn't have much to split since we had sold our house late last year and divided the proceeds equally. However, Lisa somehow managed to burn through her $114,000 share in under 2 months. From what I've pieced together, a significant portion of that money went toward supporting her new lover, evidence I'll be using in court. Initially, we had agreed to a 50-50 custody arrangement, with no alimony or child support. However, after discovering her infidelity and lack of genuine interest in the kids, I revisited the idea. When I suggested revising the custody split to 60-40 in my favor, Lisa surprised me by agreeing without much resistance. It's clear her focus is elsewhere, and she's more interested in appearing to be a responsible parent than actually being one. Her mother, who often buys into Lisa's facade, believes she's doing her best, but even that charade is causing Lisa stress. Yesterday, Lisa called me unexpectedly. Usually, she sticks to text messages, so I assumed she wanted to discuss her latest fling. Instead, she launched into a tearful monologue about her struggles with physical therapy for a toe injury she sustained at work last year. She vented about how slow her recovery was and how the injury had impacted her ability to drive and exercise. She even mentioned that she was now living with someone else, but her financial troubles were mounting, and she doubted she could manage her expenses much longer. It was difficult not to feel a twinge of satisfaction as she described the challenges she was facing. For years, she had prioritized her own desires over her family, and now it seemed her decisions were catching up with her. Despite her claims of wanting to spend more time with the kids, it was clear she was struggling to maintain even a part-time presence in their lives. She mentioned vague plans for the upcoming weekend, but seemed more concerned with how she'd balance her personal life than how she'd support the children. Lisa's behavior continues to affirm the decisions I've made. Her selfishness and disregard for our family are undeniable, and I've resolved to ensure my children have the stability they deserve. Let me know if you'd like me to continue or adjust anything further. Lisa began complaining that she wasn't seeing the children as often as she'd like, though her actions suggested otherwise. I remained firm but accommodating, suggesting we work together to establish a consistent schedule that prioritized the children's needs. However, she casually mentioned that her plan to move closer to us might not work due to high costs. Instead, she floated the idea of moving even farther away, around 15 miles. I reassured her that I would find a way to manage the situation for the sake of the children, but her response surprised me. She brought up the possibility of moving across the border to a neighboring state, claiming she'd earn a higher income there, even though the living costs were higher. This move would place her 70 to 90 miles away, making regular visitation nearly impossible. It was clear that her priorities were skewed. This wasn't about securing a better future for the children, but about pursuing her own desires. This cavalier attitude toward her responsibilities as a parent deeply concerned me. I couldn't ignore the growing evidence that Lisa was trying to distance herself from our children, subtly shifting the burden of parenthood entirely onto me. The fact that she could so casually suggest a move that would disrupt the kids' lives and schedules was troubling. Determined to understand her true motives, I began digging deeper. Through my investigation, I discovered that her plans weren't rooted in practicality, but in her ongoing relationship with her lover. By exploring his social media, I found explicit evidence that their relationship was the driving force behind her proposed relocation. She was willing to sacrifice her children's well-being and stability just to be closer to him, all while maintaining the facade of a devoted mother for the benefit of her family and friends. The realization filled me with anger and determination. Lisa's actions were reckless and selfish, and I refused to let her neglect her responsibilities as a parent. Watching her attempt to desert our family while keeping up appearances was infuriating. I took decisive action, contacting my lawyer to file a request to terminate her parental rights. When Lisa learned of my legal actions, she called me in anger, accusing me of being vindictive. I didn't waver. I calmly laid out the facts. Her decisions, motivated by her affair, were leading her to abandon her children. I asked her to consider transferring full custody to me, emphasizing that it would be better for everyone, especially the kids. For a moment, it seemed like she might agree, but her tone quickly shifted when I mentioned I wouldn't keep the truth hidden from others. Her reaction was predictable. She flatly refused, stubbornly clinging to the image of motherhood, while continuing to prioritize her own life. Recognizing her unwillingness to put the children first, I decided to reveal the truth to her family. While this wasn't an easy step, I knew it was necessary to protect my children's future. Her family deserved to know the person she had become, and perhaps this would force her to confront her actions. Unsurprisingly, Lisa reacted with fury. She accused me of trying to ruin her reputation and insisted on co-parenting from a significant distance. When I declined, she accused me of being manipulative. I didn't engage with her emotional outbursts. Instead, I sought further legal advice. I also discussed the situation with my father, including the topic of alimony. Lisa, realizing that claiming alimony would require her to contribute financially to our children's support, something she couldn't afford, began to panic. Her lover, unsurprisingly, wasn't eager to take on the burden of supporting her family, further complicating her situation. Lisa's actions have consistently shown where her priorities lie, and her recent choices only reinforce my resolve to do what's best for the children. The fight isn't over, but I'm prepared to ensure they have the stability and care they deserve. Lisa's inability to handle the responsibilities of being a parent became increasingly evident. She was overwhelmed by the financial demands of alimony and panicked over the potential damage to her carefully crafted image. Ultimately, she abandoned her relocation plans and reluctantly agreed to continue shared custody of the children. While this felt like a small victory, it was one I earned through sheer determination and an unwavering focus on my children's well-being. Despite knowing she prioritized her lover over her role as a mother, I refused to let her off the hook. For the children's sake, I did everything I could to ensure she stayed in their lives, even as her actions made it clear she was less invested in their upbringing. Unsurprisingly, her lover grew tired of the complications Lisa brought into his life and vanished, leaving her to face reality on her own. Not long after, Lisa attempted to rekindle our relationship. She made several attempts to seduce me, hoping to return to the family life she had once so easily dismissed. I firmly rejected her advances. I had no interest in someone as dishonest and fickle as her, and I made it clear that there was no path forward for us as a couple. My focus was solely on my children and building a stable future for them. 5 years later, I am now a 50-year-old nurse working tirelessly in a busy hospital. Life has brought me to another pivotal moment. Before me lies a green piece of paper bearing my name and signature, the divorce document. As I glance at it, I take a deep breath, preparing to submit it tomorrow to officially close a painful chapter of my life. Let me introduce you to Mary, my wife of 5 years. She's 3 years younger than me, and we met at work when I was 45. Mary was a medical assistant, and we were both so focused on our careers that marriage wasn't initially on our radar. Fate, however, had other plans. What started as casual conversations turned into a relationship, and after a few years of dating, we tied the knot. We were both older and wiser, so we approached marriage cautiously, deciding not to have children and instead dedicating our lives to each other. But reality had other ideas. As we settled into married life, the challenges of our demanding jobs began to take their toll. My night shifts often clashed with Mary's schedule, and health issues, especially menopause, introduced new struggles. Mary faced constant irritability, fatigue, and emotional ups and downs. While I tried to understand, the disconnect between us grew. Minor disputes became daily arguments, and exhaustion overshadowed our bond. Over time, our once strong affection faded into indifference. 5 years in, I found myself questioning the purpose of our marriage. Every day felt like a battleground, filled with bitterness and tension. One evening, as Mary returned home, I tucked the divorce papers under the table and waited for her in the living room. She greeted me with a cold, indifferent hi, her demeanor mirroring the frosty atmosphere of our relationship. Summoning my courage, I brought up the topic of divorce. Her reaction was calm, eerily so. There was no surprise, no sadness. It was as if she had already come to terms with the idea. Without argument, she accepted the papers and signed them. Her composure was a stark reminder of the emotional distance between us. Tomorrow, I'll submit the documents, officially marking the end of this chapter in my life. As I reflect on the choices that brought me here, I realize that even the strongest bonds can unravel under the weight of life's complexities. Despite everything, I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned and the clarity I've gained. As the night deepened, the air in our home felt heavy with unspoken words. Mary and I had been sleeping in separate beds for so long that sharing one felt almost foreign. Yet, tonight was different. I lay awake, struggling with the sleeplessness that had become all too familiar. To my surprise, Mary initiated a conversation, something we hadn't done in ages. We reminisced about the early days of our relationship, laughing quietly at memories of her sneaking into my bed, complaining about the cold, and playfully trying to grab my attention. Those moments of light-hearted flirtation had long since faded, tamed by age and the weight of life's challenges. Tonight, however, something about her felt reminiscent of those days. Her skimpy pajamas seemed almost intentional, as if she were reaching for a piece of the past. Catching my gaze, she smiled knowingly and asked, "May I join you in bed? It's chilly." I hesitated for a moment, but ultimately invited her under the covers. It wasn't about rekindling the marriage. We both knew that, but perhaps an unspoken wish to find some comfort in the familiarity of each other. We exchanged a soft good night, and for the first time in a long while, the bitterness of our daily lives was replaced by a fragile peace. The next morning, I woke to find Mary gone. Her belongings had disappeared from the room, leaving no trace of her presence. In the living room, I found a handwritten note. It was brief and simple, thanking me and urging me to take care of myself. That was all she left behind, a quiet farewell to mark the end of a 5-year chapter. Months passed, and life took on a new rhythm. A change in jobs brought me to a busier hospital, offering a fresh start and a way to distance myself from the memories of a failed marriage. The divorce had created discomfort at work, and my need for financial stability drove my decisions. Though single, my dedication to my career remained steadfast, and the thought of remarriage felt like a distant concept. Then one day, a new patient arrived, Mr. Jones. My boss asked me to review his paperwork. As I scanned through the documents, I noticed something that gave me pause. The patient's name was Mary's maiden name, and the details on the file seemed eerily familiar. Feeling a strange sense of connection, I went to greet the patient personally. "Excuse me, it's time for your temperature check," I said as I entered the room. The patient, who had been staring out of the window, turned to face me. To my shock, it was Mary, the woman I had once been married to. Her face was pale, her cheeks hollow, and she looked thinner than I had ever seen her. But there was no mistaking it. This was Mary. Her familiar voice, though faint, greeted me with surprise equal to my own. As I glanced at her medical chart, the severity of her condition became apparent. The cancer was advanced, more than just the weight loss and fatigue I had initially assumed. "Why didn't you tell me?" I blurted out, unable to suppress the question. "Why didn't you say anything about this before the divorce?" Mary, with a weak smile, explained that she had been diagnosed shortly before I brought up the divorce. She felt that our marriage had already been unraveling and didn't want to burden me with her illness. In her mind, letting me go was the right decision, even if it meant enduring her battle alone. Her words stirred a deep regret within me. Why hadn't I noticed the signs earlier? Why hadn't I pushed harder to bridge the emotional distance between us? But before I could spiral into self-blame, Mary interrupted my thoughts. "You're healthier than I am," she said, her voice firm despite her frailty. "So don't hang your head so low. What's done is done." Mary's words reminded me of the countless times she had been my unwavering support, even during my lowest moments. Now, as she stood before me, frail yet resolute, I was struck by the realization of how deeply I had failed to reciprocate her kindness in those 5 years together. Determined to change that, I looked at Mary and made a quiet vow to care for her until the end. "I know I don't have the right to say this," I began, "but let me take care of you." Mary's response was typical of her, a gentle smack on my head, a blend of exasperation and joy playing across her face. At first, she resisted the idea, but my persistence eventually wore her down. With a reluctant but tender smile, She agreed, though her expression betrayed a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. From that moment, I became Mary's primary caregiver. While her parents visited as often as they could, it was clear that additional support was needed. Her family lived far away, and with my familiarity with the hospital environment, I became the one who tended to her daily needs. Despite my initial concerns that her family might harbor resentment, they welcomed my involvement, understanding the complexities of our relationship. In the months that followed, I was a constant presence in Mary's hospital room. No matter my work schedule, whether before a shift, after a shift, or on my rare days off, I was there. Her chemotherapy treatments began in earnest, and while I had cared for countless patients as a nurse, the experience of watching Mary endure the process was profoundly different. Treating a stranger was one thing. Treating someone you loved was an emotional whirlwind. I tried to stay professional, but it was impossible not to let my heart take over. The despair of her struggle overwhelmed me at times. Despite her courage, the treatment seemed ineffective against the metastasized cancer. Mary had started her treatment right after our divorce, but the disease had advanced too far. Watching Mary endure the grueling pain of her battle left me feeling powerless. Yet, she remained unbroken in spirit, often smiling and showing gratitude for even the smallest gestures. Her resilience, while inspiring, was a painful reminder of my own limitations. When her health worsened and the doctors decided to halt aggressive treatments, it was a harsh reality to accept. Mary, however, embraced it with grace. "I want to live whatever time I have left to the fullest," she whispered. From then on, our focus shifted to creating meaningful moments. On our better days, we laughed over old stories, went on short walks, and even tried crafts together. My clumsy attempts at creating anything artistic often led to her teasing laughter, which was worth every awkward effort. These fleeting moments of joy became precious. But the cancer was relentless. As Mary's condition deteriorated, her laughter grew quieter, and her vitality waned. Sleepless nights were filled with her pain, and while the painkillers helped ease some of it, they couldn't erase her suffering. Often, I would find her tears hidden beneath a brave smile. "Thank you for always being here," she said one night, her voice soft but sincere. "It means more than you know." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that my presence gave her strength, even as the days grew shorter. One evening, as I sat by her bedside in the quiet hospital room, I found myself overcome with emotion. I reached out, took her hand, and said the words I had been holding back. "Will you marry me?" Mary's response was light-hearted and affectionate, as always. "You're sweet," she said with a soft chuckle. But no, despite her refusal, I wasn't ready to give up. A few days later, I returned with a marriage certificate, my signature already in place. I held it out to her, and her smile lit up the room. Though she never signed it, the gesture itself brought her immense joy, a testament to the bond we had rebuilt. Mary passed away just a few days later, exceeding the doctor's expectations by a month. Her strength and determination during that time were remarkable. As I prepared for her funeral, I realized how much that extra month had meant to both of us. It was a time filled with connection, love, and closure. Although we weren't legally married, Mary's parents embraced me as though we were. Together, we mourned the loss of a woman who had faced her challenges with courage and grace. The funeral arrangements came together quickly, and as I stood among her family and friends, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the time we had shared, even amidst the sorrow. Mary's parents insisted I sit with them in the family section at the funeral. Initially hesitant, I accepted, feeling both honored and deeply moved by their gesture. As the service proceeded and we eventually made our way to the gravesite, I found myself surprisingly composed. I had already shed my tears during the months I cared for Mary, leaving me with a quiet sense of resolve. While waiting for the final part of the burial, I sat on a bench, staring at the endless expanse of the sky. Mary was no longer in this world, and her absence left an undeniable void in my heart. Unexpectedly, Mary's mother approached me. Her red, swollen eyes reflected her grief, a pain far greater than my own. She softly said, "Ken, you were here," her voice a fragile blend of sorrow and gratitude. She handed me a letter and a diary Mary had left behind for me to receive on the day of her funeral. With trembling hands and a heavy heart, I accepted them. Opening the diary first, I found it to be as simple and genuine as Mary herself. It began with short notes about the mundane details of daily life, but became more reflective after we met. The entries chronicled our dates, my job evaluations, our conversations, and even the small mishaps that had dotted our years together. As I read on, the focus shifted. Mary began writing about her frustrations and regrets, particularly those tied to her menopause and how she had misdirected her emotions at me. She acknowledged her struggle to communicate effectively and reflected on how my emotional distance had grown in response. The words were raw and honest, and they cut deep. One entry, dated a month before our divorce, stood out. It was the day Mary learned of her cancer diagnosis. She had written about her deliberate choice to hide her emotions from me, shielding me from the truth while putting on a brave face. The entry ended abruptly as she recounted the day I proposed divorce. Her words painted a bittersweet picture of joy as she reminisced about happier times, but they left me with the weight of her unspoken thoughts. Turning to the letter, I found her voice as vivid as ever. She wrote of her disbelief at seeing me again in a new hospital and how deeply my offer to care for her had moved her. She admitted she hadn't been able to refuse my help, even though it nearly broke her emotionally. Mary described the happiness I had brought her in her final days, apologizing for the pain she had caused and expressing gratitude for everything we shared. Her final wish was clear. She didn't want me to grieve for her. Instead, she urged me to live my life fully and to wait until old age to reunite with her in heaven. If my feelings remained unchanged, she promised we would marry again in the afterlife. The letter ended with a note about the marriage certificate I had brought her, which she had kept as a symbol of our bond. As I finished reading, tears streamed down my face. For the first time in years, I openly wept. Mary's parents, noticing my anguish, offered quiet comfort. Their gesture of including me in the family section was a testament to Mary's wishes and the love we had shared, even in the face of life's challenges. At the gravesite, I wiped my tears and remembered Mary's request, not to cry for her. Composing myself, I bid her farewell with a small, bittersweet smile. She rested peacefully in the casket, holding the marriage certificate we had shared in her hands. Her calm expression seemed to echo the bond we had rebuilt, a connection that endured through trials and pain.